Okay, this is going to be a new series on the synoptics, and it's a real challenge because there's so much information interrelated that it's a question of how can I present this on screen. I'm going to introduce this by showing something that I call a wraparound rhetorical style. Apparently, a lot of the scholars aren't aware of it, or they forgot, or something. So they question which is the first gospel, or whether there was a Q gospel, or all kinds of other nonsense, instead of just looking at the Bible text, because the Bible will tell you what's first and what's coming after. And one of the ways it does that is it uses what's called what I'm calling a wraparound rhetorical style. So we're going to look at this right now. In the left-hand side of the screen, you've got Matthew. I've presented the Gospels in the actual order the Bible says they occur. Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John. And the reason you know that's the order in which they occur is by the rhetorical style used by each author. There's not been very much attention done to it. The church fathers were extremely incompetent theologically. And so the church fathers speculated on some hidden gospel that everybody borrowed from, thereby proving that the church fathers were idiots. You know, they might have been good with their Greek, but they sure weren't good with theology. They were stupid in many ways, and I don't know why we respect them. Okay, we need to look at them because they, encapsulate the history of the times and for the way the Greek language is used, but theologically they were idiots. We should not respect their theology. Their theology was stupid. So when you see a church father saying, oh, I think the original gospel was in Hebrew and we're going to call it Q, of course that's a modern scholar term for it, just throw them out. They're not thinking with their brains. They're not using the Bible to find out the answer. So let's do that. Matthew 3 starts talking in chronological order about John the Baptist. That's not where Matthew starts his book. But that's where Matthew starts talking about John the Baptist, who technically is the subject closing the last book of the Bible. Oh, I hope my computer can take all these windows. The last book of the Bible is Malachi, and the chapter where John the Baptist is talked about, let me get rid of the lexical window, is right here. Behold, I'm going to send you Elijah. If you were picking up in chronological order from the last book of the Bible, skipping the Apocrypha, the Jewish Apocrypha, the intertestamental period, which all the Jews knew was, just commentary, not really Bible. If you were to pick up on the last book of the real Bible God authored, you would be picking up there. Okay? Matthew has a different rhetorical focus from the Gospels that come after him. And we're going to show that the Gospels that come after him are all referencing Matthew. But logically, this is where you start. Who is this Elijah? If you're going to continue chronologically from where the Bible left off. Okay, Matthew, however, doesn't do that. He's got an introductory flourish in chapters 1 and 2, which we'll go through. But he doesn't really begin with the Elijah that is to come, namely John the Baptist, until Matthew 3. Okay? Now, Luke is going to pick up at John the Baptist in Luke 1. Mark is going to pick up at Matthew 3, see, with the same quote. That's his opening. He's picking up on Matthew 3 also, just like Luke did. And John is going to pick up where Luke 3 leaves off. And I'm going to save John for later, because John is tying to both Matthew 3 and to Luke, how Luke does a circle, which I'm going to have to show you. So the key to this whole thing with Mark and John is what happens in Luke, how Luke fashions his gospel around, wrapping around Matthew. And it's going to take me many, many videos to show this because Luke's technique is very sophisticated. All right. This technique, however, is a technique that has been used ever since Genesis. So why don't the scholars figure it out? I have no clue. How come they're so dumb? A brainout can figure this out. Why didn't they? I don't know. So I'm just going to show you what it is. Okay, it's real obvious to anybody that Exodus wraps around Genesis because Genesis ends with Joseph and his family entering Egypt. So Exodus shows 400 years later how they get out of Egypt. It's picking up where the last book left off. So Luke is picking up the same story, but he's going to keep on tying to Matthew where Matthew leaves off. He's going to do flashbacks and flash forwards. But you first have to know why Matthew's doing what he's doing. So in order to show that, we've got to go back to Matthew 1. Sorry if I get heated. I can't understand why there's been, 2 millennia of incompetence in Christian scholarship. It just drives me wild. It's so obvious that they're incompetent, and they won't admit it. Why won't they admit it? It's fine, be whatever denomination you are. Just admit your mistake, fix it, and move on and still be the same denomination. Who cares? Just get the data right, okay? Please? All right. So here's Matthew going through the genealogy of Christ. All right? And that takes you all the way here. Now the key for Matthew to interpret why Matthew's doing what he's doing is right here. Okay, in order to know that key, you'd have to know the Hebrew meter of Isaiah 53. You'd have to know the Hebrew meter of Psalm 90. So the speculation, and I can't prove it wrong yet, but I can't prove it right either, the speculation that Matthew was originally in Hebrew, this sort of feeds that speculation a little bit. Because 14, 14, and 14 is 42 syllables. Isaiah 52, 13, and 14 are the first 2 verses in the Hebrew of Isaiah 53, and they are 42 syllables on purpose. Isaiah divides Isaiah 53 into 2 units of 42 syllables to begin and end, to bookend his own chapter. The sum of 42 and 42 equals 84, and that matches the number of syllables in the millennial section of Psalm 90's meter, which is Psalm 90 verses 1 through 5, which includes the promise of the millennium to Messiah. So if you knew your Hebrew Old Testament, you would immediately be reminded of Isaiah 53, and you'd be immediately reminded of Psalm 90 because Isaiah 53 is patterned on the meter pattern of Psalm 90. You would immediately know that. And of course, it's all about Messiah in both chapters. All right, so when Matthew is making up, I can't believe the scholars were so incompetent. They go, well, this isn't really the genealogy of Jesus Christ. They're missing generations. Yeah, of course. Like Atalia, whose kids weren't legitimate. They don't bother to check the rhetorical style. They don't bother to check the rhetorical pattern. And all they do is just badmouth the Bible. Somebody should fire those scholars. They're so incompetent. They don't bother to check why Matthew does what he does. Okay? So, here's why. 14, 14, and 14. Why? Because Isaiah 53 is the prophecy about Messiah. What is Matthew about? Matthew is relating to us what? The credentials, the birthright of Messiah. That's how he opens. It's a very legalistic way to open the book. Legalistic in the sense of, conforming to protocol. Conforming to legal protocol. He's presenting the credentials of Messiah. And he's presenting it on Joseph's line because Joseph is the legal father. All right, but he makes sure that you know that just because Joseph is the legal father, see, All right? He's doing the chronology of Joseph. And he's saying, look, by legal genealogy, Christ has a right to be Messiah, son of David. Now, you'd have to get into this part here, which, the audience would know, but we moderns don't know, is that, and I forget which one it is, either Shealtiel or Zerubbabel was adopted. The Jeconiah Curse comes in here. This is Jeconiah, and I don't remember if Shealtiel was his natural son but couldn't have any kids, so adopted Zerubbabel, or whether Jeconiah, who was only 18 when he was taken into Babylon and age 55 when he got out, if he adopted Shealtiel. I don't remember that off the top of my head, but you can check it in the Bible. The Bible has the information. So Zerubbabel is the son of Nathan, and who is the son of David and Bathsheba. So instead of it being through the Solomonic line, it goes through Nathan. Nathan is the prophet Nathan in the Old Testament when David was alive. Nathan means given by God. Okay. Natan means to give. And Zerubbabel, and this is cute, Zerubbabel, Zeru means seed, okay, in Chaldean, and Babel means Baal. Okay, so Zerubbabel is promised in Haggai 2 that he's going to be the seed of Messiah. Okay, on the 24th of Kislev, which happens to be the eve of the birth of Christ, which happens to be 357 years after Zerubbabel got the promise, would be the first Hanukkah. See, if you're Jewish and you've got all this background, you know that Shealtiel or Zerubbabel, whichever one it is adopted, and you know what Zerubbabel means, and you know the promise in Haggai 2 to Zerubbabel. You're laughing when you read this. This is very funny and witty. Okay, all these names have meanings. Okay, they're like little paragraphs about the meaning of the person. Okay, and Zerubbabel goes from being the seed of Baal to being the seed of Christ. Haggai 2, announced to him twice, hypostatic union, on the 25th of Kislev. The day that Christ is going to end up being born in Matthew 2. Feast of Lights is what it boils down to. Okay, so this is a credential. He's working first, taking a legal, lawyer approach, and doing credentials, but he's not being boring about it. There are little things in here that are cute, like Zerubbabel, for example. Now, both Mary and Joseph descend from Zerubbabel, and we'll find that out when Luke does his version of wrapping around Matthew in Luke 3. But Zerubbabel is definitely, turns the brain on if you're Jewish. You immediately think of Haggai 2 and the promise. Okay, so he's asserting that the promise of Messiah is fulfilled from Zerubbabel forward, just like God said in Haggai 2. Okay, and he's dividing them up into 14s, because that's 3 14s is 42. That's the number of syllables in Isaiah 52, 13, and 14, which is the promise to the Jews of a Messiah. So he's tying to that, and he's selecting 14 generations in each thing. And the Jews would all know that. They know that there are people left out. We're imposing our standards on the Bible about how it ought to be written, instead of looking to find out what its own standards are for its own audience at the time. And that's what I mean by the church fathers being complete idiots theologically. They didn't bother to learn Jewish culture. They were anti-Semitic. They figured, well, if the Jews know something, it must be wrong because they're Jews. All right, so they didn't investigate, which of course Luke is going to do. All right, they didn't investigate the meaning of this stuff. So they give you all kinds of garbage in their interpretation, and all these people objecting, well, this isn't, we can't find these names, and they're not in order, and blah, 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 that there were more than 14. Yes, there were. And Matthew is selecting it to make a play on the fulfillment of the promise. Okay? And if you were a Jew and you read this, you'd know that, and you wouldn't have any problem with it being worded the way it is. Anyway, sorry. I just get so hot and bothered when I hear how incompetent a lot of the teaching is. Okay? So now he's going to go, see, we've just finished his birthright, And he's claiming Isaiah 53 when he words it this way, with the 14s. Saying, hi, fulfillment of Psalm 90, verses 1 through 5. Fulfillment of Isaiah 53. Born. So, logically, the next thing to talk about is his birth. So we go from birthright to the birth itself. Now, since Matthew's focus is on the credentials and qualification of Christ, he's going to leave out a lot of stuff. All right? Because he's trying to get you to focus on certain aspects of a story that by the time he's writing, everybody already knows. He's writing an official version of the story. Everybody had 1,000 versions out there. Okay, and for reasons I can explain hopefully in later videos, this gospel must have come out within 3-4 years of Christ's death, and might even have been compiled from something that he started while Christ was alive. Okay, because Paul quotes Matthew, and Paul started his ministry in 44. So Paul's quoting Matthew. He's quoting Matthew 7. He's quoting Matthew 9. In other sections, specifically Matthew 7 and Romans 10. So I have to do more study in Paul to find out how much Matthew he quotes to be able to say, well, certainly by the time Paul wrote Galatians, for example, Matthew's gospel was well known. I'm not 100% sure yet of the timing. But it came out real short after Christ died, if not before. Okay, so here's his birth being told. And it's just very summary. All right, you notice? He's focusing on the scandal. Okay? And he's tying the whole thing, you know, the virgin conceiving. His whole point of these verses right here highlighted in blue is to say that this prophecy of God is being fulfilled. That's why he's telling that part of the story. And that's why he's leaving out the other things. Because the other things that like Luke and Mark and John will bring up relate to other passages and other prophecies. But Matthew's focus is on this. All right? I mean, you can read this at your leisure. I have to, in order to keep the flow here, I've got to get going through this. All right, so then Joseph, who was going to dispute Mary's pregnancy, doesn't dispute it because of his dream. All right, now get this. So you have the lineage here. All right, summarized by harken back to Isaiah 53 and Psalm 90. Then you have the fact of the birth occurring, and how Joseph was gonna forget it, gonna say no, and it's validated. So you got two validations opening Matthew 1. The first validation is the lineage. The second validation is an angel witnessing to Joseph that Mary's pregnancy is by the Holy Spirit. So that's Matthew's focus, validating Messiah's birthright, validating Messiah's claim to be Messiah. That's the theme of chapter 1. So now, chapter 2, since the theme was the validation of Messiah in chapter 1, and he introduced the problem of objection via Joseph. See? Don't be afraid. This is valid. Joseph listens to the voice of the angel. Joseph takes his word for it. But Joseph had to get that voice first. Joseph had to get that witness first. All right. But nobody else is listening. And Matthew, like the other Bible writers, when he's going to say something ironic, he sort of finesses it. He uses it sort of sotto voce. See, after he was born in Bethlehem, and I'll have to get into this because there's a lot of incompetent theological speculation on this too. After he was born in Bethlehem, there come these magi. It's not 3, and they're not kings. They're Persian VIPs. You don't know how many. The point is that they're Persian VIPs. That's real important to the story. They come to Jerusalem and say, Where is the King of the Jews? We saw his star. Okay, now understand something. If there was a physical star in the sky over Jerusalem, then this verse would not be here. This whole passage would not be here. If Herod and Jerusalem were seeing the same thing that the Magi were seeing, they wouldn't be upset. They would be answering the Magi. See, the Magi are saying, where's the King of the Jews? Okay, so if the star was something that Jerusalem was able to see, then Herod would say, oh yeah, of course, he's born in Bethlehem. But instead, Herod has to ask about it. Why? Because there's no star that they can see. They don't know what the heck the Magi are talking about. And the Magi are Persian VIPs. Persia was an enemy of Rome. So this is a big political problem for Herod, to have these Persian VIPs coming in saying, oh, where's the King of the Jews? We've come to worship him. In other words, the enemy of Rome, in a great big entourage with a lot of flash, comes into Jerusalem, which is a buffer state of Israel between Rome and Persia, and says, oh, we want to worship the King of the Jews. The first thing the Romans are going to want to do is crack down. What, is Persia coming to take over Israel in the name of worshiping the King of the Jews? And Herod's king on the throne due to Octavian, aka Augustus, who he used to be the enemy of Augustus when he supported Mark Antony, but he patched it up with Octavian, aka Augustus, and he's now sitting on the throne in Jerusalem courtesy of Rome. But these Persian Magi are coming in saying, hi, we want to worship the King of the Jews. And obviously that king isn't Herod. You see what Herod faces? Full-scale civil war, because the Jews didn't want to be ruled by Rome. They're not particularly happy about Persia either. But at this particular stage in the game, Persia might look good, especially if the Persians are going to support, are going to bow the knee to some other Jew. You see, that's why Herod wants to kill the babies. There's a big political problem here. Yeah, and how many times have you heard that covered? So there's no freaking star, okay? If there was a star, Herod could have just bought these Magi off and said, oh yeah, here's the star, here's the king, but he's not a political king, which of course he wasn't. He's born in Bethlehem, and he could have just gone to them and said blah, blah, blah. But instead, he's asking when the star appeared. Yeah, because he can't see it. Because Jerusalem can't see it. Because there's no star. It's an angel. And you find that out later in Matthew. There's no star. Or he wouldn't have to ask the Magi questions. He'd be giving them this information and, sending them on their way. But instead, he has to ask them when the star appeared because he can't see one. Do you get that? Do you know how many incompetent churches have been, the 3 wise men and the baby in the manger? It never happened. And as you find out from Matthew, and Luke is going to elaborate on it, Mary and Joseph are sitting in Jerusalem at this time being guarded by an angel. Because she has to wait 40 days for her rites of purification. 40 days after your kid's born, you have to appear at the temple and make a sacrifice for your purification from, bearing kids. So this is within a month after Christ is born. They just hung behind. He's born in Bethlehem, but then they got to stay behind in Jerusalem to present her at the temple. Okay, and there's no star. So what is this telling you? You got Gentile Magi acting as heralds for the King of the Jews, Christ, who was just born, to a very negative, this word troubled is terrasso, and it means tumult. It means all upset. It means, just discombobulated, frantic. So they're not seeing any star. So these Magi are Gentiles talking to Jews who see no star because they're unbelievers. They don't see the angel. And they're all ticked off and looking for a way to kill whoever this alleged king is so that Rome doesn't come and smack them, flat. And so that's why Herod resorts to a ruse. Oh, well, when did the star appear? And then, go to Bethlehem for me. And then Herod's planning ahead 2 years because he's got to kill, all the babies in Judea, ideally in Israel too. And that's going to take some time because once he starts killing the babies, the mothers are going to hide their babies. So it's going to take him 2 years to kill them. So that's why he picks everyone that's suckling, because you're suckling when you're under 2 years old. So what you're seeing here, the pattern is Gentile herald to Herod, announcing a king that Herod's got to kill, lest Rome step in and squash Jerusalem. Because Persia is the enemy of Rome, has always been the enemy of Rome. They were never able to defeat Persia. And that's why all this stuff is going on. Okay, but the Magi are innocent. They're believers. They don't know any better. And what they see here is an angel. And this is in Nazareth, because this word here is oikon in the Greek. It means a big house. It's not a stable. It's not a manger. And the star led them. Stars don't lead you anywhere. Stars don't proago. Okay? The star led them to the house. That's what it says in the Greek. See, it went on. This is proago right here in the Greek. Okay? And then it hovers. See, hovers, stood over the place where the child was. Yeah, the oikon, the house, not the manger. Proago is the Greek word here. And histemi is the Greek word here. It's standing. It's standing. Stars don't stand. Stars don't play Mitch Miller bouncing ball over the text. The star is standing straight over the oikon, the house. That's oikon in Greek right here. All right? So you got a Gentile heralds to Herod, the Jewish king, about a different Jewish king to replace him as far as Herod was thinking. So Herod's got to kill him if only to keep peace with Rome. So Herod plays this ruse, which they find out about, okay, because they're innocent believers in Christ. And that's why they, but not Jerusalem, can see the star, and why it, which is an angel, not a star, proagos, goes on before them until it stands. Stars don't stand still. Stars don't move forward and then stand still. And that's why they rejoiced, and it's in an oikon, meaning a great house, an edifice, not a manger. Okay? And this is about 1 month afterwards, because, as we're going to find out from Luke, they return to Nazareth after she does her rites of purification. All right? And that's when you get the gold, silver, and, gold and myrrh. Oh, bloody hell. Let's get that out. That's where you get the gold and myrrh. That part of it's right. And then, warned by God in a dream, they go another way in order to avoid Herod. Okay? And that's when the kid is like, a month old. He goes to Egypt. And then, of course, Herod tries to kill him. And before he even gets really started, God kills him. And then tells Joseph to go home. All right? And then Joseph has a moment of doubt. But then he overcomes that doubt. And he goes to, and this is a dramatic thing, Matthew reserves this to the end. Nazareth, Nazarene, it means dedicated. Nazar means to guard, to dedicate. And Luke is going to use this to play off. He's going to play off this in his gospel. Okay, but first I have to show you how Matthew was worded so we can see how Luke plays off it. This means to guard. Nazar means to guard. It also means to dedicate. Number 6 is the Nazarite vow. All right? So that's why when it says he'll be called Nazarene, it's making a joke out of the fact that he was dedicated. And the other term for dedicated, another reason why it's a joke, is Chanuk. This is where we get Hanukkah. Enoch, we call Enoch, it's really Chanuk, dedicated. Okay, so Christ was born on the dedication day, which we call Hanukkah. All right, Feast of Lights, which Luke is going to play on all that. And Nazar is a play on Chanuk, dedication, guard, to guard, dedicated to. Okay, and it means dedicated to God. I mean, that's the root idea behind Nazar, but it ends up meaning guarding anything. Your whole life is devoted to guarding the word. All right, and that's what's so cute about it. And the reason why Nazareth was also called Nazareth is that they were sheep herders. They were guarding the sheep. All right, and that's why this is so funny. It's you have to be, I guess, Jewish or Hebrew to get the wit here. And that's how Matthew closes the paragraph on this. And the next topic is John the Baptist. So when you get to Luke, Luke is going to wrap around Matthew to end up at the same place by talking about what went before and what comes after. And Luke 3 is basically going to end where Matthew 1 ends, just before the birth. Okay, we're back in the Synoptics, and now we're going to cover how Luke constructs his wraparound of Matthew. It's really complicated to explain this, and I'm probably going to do a bad job of it, but I got to say something. So if you get really sick of this video, just turn it off. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Okay, right here, you're looking at the last book of the Old Testament that's the official word of God. In other words, leaving out the Jewish Apocrypha. And the last chapter of the last book and the penultimate verse of the Old Testament is Malachi 4:5. And it ends with a promise. Okay? Malachi is basically a short book that says, hi, you guys are so apostate, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. But, and this is how it closes, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. Okay? This is what Luke is going to key off. Now, Elijah is John. And we're going to see that right here. And that's in Luke 1:17, and that hopefully you know enough about what Luke 1 says, that it's a prophecy about John to Zacharias, where Zacharias is sitting in the Holy of Holies. Okay, not the Holy of Holies, but just outside the Holy of Holies. So this is a quotation, as you can see in the caps. That's why I use the NASB in my videos. The caps are quotations of Old Testament verses. All right, and the Old Testament verse being quoted is the one to the left of the Luke passage in the center, which is Malachi 4:5 and 6. See, this is what Luke is quoting. All right. Now, before I can even explain that, this is so complicated because, you have to understand, they didn't have TV and entertainment in those days. What they had was their holy book, and this is what they lived on when they were, processing grain, when they were making pots, when they were washing clothes. They constantly went over their holy books. It was entertainment, it was a way of schooling, it was everything to them. It was their whole culture, their whole life. So they all had this stuff memorized. So you only had to say a few key words for the people to know immediately what verse you were talking about. All right? They memorized the meter, they memorized the syllable count. You still do that today. Okay, they don't do it like they did in the Old Testament, but they do it. They still do it. So you can see something of that culture surviving in modern Judaism. Okay, so when he says this, everybody knows what he's talking about. Okay? And this is Gabriel talking, and he's only saying a snippet of this part of the verse. All right? And turn and restore is the same word. Okay? So he's talking to this, and they all know what that, and Zacharias knew immediately what he was talking about. This is the prophecy of Elijah to come, which is the John the Baptist. Now, unfortunately, before I can go forward, I have to explain this. I don't know how much you can find about this in modern Judaism. It does exist. There has always been an understanding in Judaism, but today it's really garbled, that the day of the Lord were two. Okay, you see that survive in modern Judaism as the sort of hypothesis of the rabbis, and then that begins with Rambam, who's one of the most famous rabbis of all time. Rambam is Maimonides. That history was organized in units of 2,000 years. The first 2,000 years were for the Goyim, the Gentiles. Second 2,000 years are for the Jews, at the end of which Christ would come. And that's kind of where they're stuck in modern Judaism today, because they think he didn't come, but he did. And the third 2,000 years are supposed to belong to Messiah. That's current Judaic thought. It's not, Judaism is as diverse as Christianity, so not all Jews believe it. But it's a common stream that you can search on the internet for the third 2,000 years belonging to Messiah. And it was Maimonides who came up with that idea, or he was building on prior sages. I don't know for sure where he got it, but he did say it. So the idea is that there are 2 days of the Lord. Day of the Lord is 1,000 years. That's coming directly from Psalm 90, because Psalm 90 is an orchestration of time. Psalm 90 is the quintessential orchestration of time psalm. And I went through my Psalm 90 video playlist. We'll walk you through the Hebrew so you can see it for yourself. It's done in meter. And then the words are the testimonies of people belonging to each segment of time that Moses is covering. And then the last segment of time was prophetic about the temple. All right? So this is something that everybody was expecting. The first day of the Lord, he would arrive to pay for sins. And then at the end of the day of the Lord, history would terminate. That was the millennium. The Lord was supposed to kick off the last 1,000 years of history by first arriving, paying for sins, going to heaven, being successful, then coming back, gathering the Jews, and then they have their 1,000 years of being queen of the nations, and then history ends. That's something everybody knew from Psalm 90. So you got 2 days of the Lord. And the 2 days of the Lord was something that was invented after Christ died, because at the end of the second 2,000 years, the Jews had all gotten their timeline all screwed up, and they couldn't figure out. They figured that Messiah hadn't come. And that's where they're at now. They're waiting for the 6,000 years to end. They think it's year 5770 from the creation of the world. They're wrong about that. But that's what they think, the 5771 now. They think they're in year 5771 from creation, and that means they're expecting they're expecting Messiah to come in about 200 years, 230 years. Their calendar's completely messed up now. But this is where it's coming from. This is what day of the Lord means. This is why that reference is there. Okay, it's hearkening back to the Psalm 90 timeline. And of course, Isaiah uses the term a lot to talk about that future day. So he's saying, hi, Messiah, the first day of the Lord, which is really only one day in the Bible, but the Jews now manufacture it as 2,000 years instead of 1. That's what that means. All right, so Luke is going to start back. He's linking up to the last book of the Old Testament. He's going to fill in what Matthew didn't say, because Luke's rhetorical focus is different. Okay, and how do we know what Luke's rhetorical focus is? He tells us right here. All right? Luke tells you, if we just read the Bible, we can figure out what it means, because it tells us what it means. But we got to pay attention. We got to pick it apart. You can't read it like a novel. And the books are in the wrong order in our Bible, so we have to find out when the books were written. And that's not an easy thing to do because the scholars have been so incompetent about saying when the books were written. When the books tell you when they were written. See, look. Luke is saying, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account. So Luke is telling you right away, hi, I'm not the first gospel. Just as they were handed down to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses of the word. He's talking all the way back to Genesis now. Okay, the eyewitnesses start with what? Moses, who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. Okay, now when he says it seems fitting, this translation's not good. I'm going to have to go through it a little bit. It seems fitting for me as well, having investigated everything, to write it out for you. Okay, it doesn't say write it out for you, it says write to you. Okay, I'm going to try and not focus too much on the Greek, but I have to say some things. Okay, the word investigated is not investigated, it means to follow. I'm going to have to go through this. When he says it seems fitting for me, that's okay, translation. It's not really the best. It's incumbent upon me. It seemed fitting, it's incumbent. It's a good modern English translation. Okay, this phrase right here is what's translated, it seemed fitting. It means it's incumbent upon me. It means he's being ordered to do this. By who? By God. Because the word investigated, I'll have to bring up the thing here. The word investigated I have to go to Bauer Danker for this. This is the Bauer Danker lexicon in Bible Works. Okay? You have to pay to get this. So if you got Bible Works and you don't have this lexicon, you have to pay extra to get it. It's $75, I think. Closely associated with someone as an authority. The only authority is God. And there's wordplay here because this is play on paraclete. This whole word is a play on paraclete, meaning the Holy Spirit. All right. When my pastor exegeted this, he made a big stink about how Luke was doing this from the Holy Spirit. All right. And I'm sort of like, after years, I heard that class years ago, and I'm just looking at it independently now, and I'm just making notes about what I see, and then you can find out other things if you take more time. But this should be translated, it was incumbent upon me, being in close association with the Holy Spirit, not investigated, being in close association with the authority, okay, from the beginning, all right, like when he was first a believer, through Paul. All right, and of course Paul is the other authority with whom he's in close association. Okay, I should give you what? Catexis. Catexis. You're supposed to say, go ace. Your voice is supposed to go up and down when you say this eta right here. I can't do it quite right. It's not an accent. It's a tone. It's your tone of voice. Your voice is supposed to either fall or rise and fall. Okay. Like this is all about breathing. Okay. These are breathing marks. They're not accent marks, but it's hard to explain, and I'm just going to leave that out right now. So instead of investigated, it's having been in close association with the source from the beginning. I'm writing you. Here's where writing you is. It's not write it out for you, it's writing you. Okay? And what are you writing? You're writing an official. Let me get the word up here. Okay? It isn't so much successive, although that meaning is in view and Luke is going to follow a certain succession. But what he's really trying to say is official. Okay, I don't want to call it. Okay, see, being in sequence in time, space, or logic, one after the other. In other words, he's going to compile an orderly account. But it's not the first. You got that? It's an orderly account. It's an official account. And the other term that tells us that it's official is in the next verse. Okay, this word here, katekis, I can't say it right today. Okay, this is where we get the word catechism from. This is the official, okay, the idea of official reading, official account. All right? And you can look all this up. This is Thayer, okay, in Freiburg. And here's Bauer Anchor. Okay? To share look at this. Share a communication one has received. Received from who? The authority. So it's not exact truth. It's official truth. All right? So when Luke is talking here, he's saying it's incumbent on me, having been in close association with the source from the beginning, to write out for you in official order. And then there's a question of whether Theophilus was really a person or just a nickname for anybody who loves God. All right, you can take it either way. The point is that this is the official truth, as opposed to what? As opposed to all these other accounts that are out there. In other words, he's ordered to write this. So whether he used as his foil, as it were, some guy who happened to be nicknamed Theophilus, lover of God, or whether he's addressing it to any lover of God, you can play with that. So, you may have the official truth. Okay, now he's writing, 14 years after Matthew, 20 years, somewhere between 44 and 60 AD, he's writing this. Because Paul also quotes Luke in his writings. I haven't honed down yet what books are the earliest that he quotes Luke. I have to work on that. But Paul's quoting Luke and Matthew in what Paul writes. So Matthew and Luke were out at some time during Paul's ministry. All right? So when he's doing this and he's writing, we have why he's doing what he's doing. He's going to do something, he's going to basically fill in the blanks and wrap his gospel around Matthew for the purpose of giving the fuller picture. All right? So that's why he starts, again, with the birth of John the Baptist. Because he's playing off this. He's playing off this, which is Malachi, the close of the Old Testament. And he's also playing off, he's going to play in reverse order from Matthew 3. And my computer's starting to slow down now. Matthew covers this after having introduced Christ, his birth, and the Gentile heralds that Herod rejected. This is now, in Matthew 3, a Jewish Levite priest entitled to serve in the temple, who instead is going to go to the wilderness because the priests are so apostate. And this is a Jewish priest entitled to serve in temple but refusing to serve in temple, speaking to Jews. You already had the Magi, who were Persians, Gentiles, witnessing to Jerusalem. And now Matthew next goes to the Jewish herald, which is Elijah back in Malachi 4, 5, and 6. That's Matthew's order. So Luke is going to wrap around Matthew's order. He's going to come full circle to this in Matthew. But he starts in Luke 1 chronologically and piggybacking on Malachi 4 and 5 with John the Baptist. And we'll cover more about that in the next increment.